right. It is Tuesday, April 15th. Happy Tax Day, Bradford. Anything you doing to celebrate?
No, just trying to make sure I pay them.
So a lot to get into today. Hopefully everyone's sitting on nice realized gains that they can pay a nice hefty tax bill for. But what I'm more interested in than taxes is the volatility seems to be finally reducing. We didn't have any 10% S&P 500 days, really not even 5% days in the last week or so. So after that insane bout of volatility that we got, I guess it was basically just 2 weeks ago into call it last Wednesday or so.
Matt.
Well, it started before that. It started 2 weeks ago with the tariffs. And then it kind of continued into last week. So it was kind of like 2 weeks ago Wednesday into about last Wednesday. So now we're, I think, on the other end of this. VIX has finally come down a little bit. Things are settled a little bit, resembling like normal movements where, we're looking at like 1%, 2%, 3% moves in the major indices. I know you've got some thoughts on that, but before we go to your post, what's your thoughts on this? Is it about as you would expect? I mean, VIX obviously couldn't stay up as high as it was forever.
Yeah, so generally, if you can pick a bottom, if you can pick a height of the fear, you're going to pick the bottom of the market. Easier said than done. Because when you're near a bottom, the fear is so high, everyone's screaming and acting like the world is going to end. Certainly, there's been a lot of negativity about tariffs. We got a lot of that, especially last week, two Mondays ago, so 8 days ago, but also last Tuesday as well. And when that happened, we did a video, not financial advice, but you and I were extremely busy those 2 days, selling bonds, buying stocks, selling money market funds, trimming those and adding the stocks, because we sense that a top of the fear might have been in. And so we were deploying into stocks. So we're a bit guilty in that the bond market sold off so much. But
I don't think we drove that. I think the nominal value of that's a little bit higher than what we've got in our book. But yeah,
I'm guessing we weren't the only ones. And so the reason I say this is I've been doing this for 20 years, and you see if the VIX peaks, then that's very close to the bottom. And you and I have been having a lot of client meetings recently, and you raised a couple good points about recessions and market bottoms. Would you like to share those?
Yeah, sure. I will. Maybe just a second before I get into that, I did want to kind of touch on the video we did last week, since you brought it up. I mean, I kind of went back and watched part of it, because this time last week, I mean, it feels like a month ago, but it was just 7 days ago. We were saying like all the moves we made, but like I think if you listen to our language, it was like it did not feel comfortable. It did not feel like we're sure that we're right. We felt like it was the prudent thing to do, but we weren't like necessarily happy about it, because like it does feel a little bit yucky to go heavier into risk in that particular moment. Fast forward 1 week and S&P's up around 8%, a little north of 8% from where we were, and now we're feeling like a lot more comfortable and like, oh yeah, it seems more obvious now that the bottom is in. There's been some negotiations on tariffs and things like that. It seems like there's cooler heads maybe prevailing, and I think it's a lot easier to say, yeah, like maybe we'll go up from here. But you've missed 8% of the movement if you waited until now to do that.
Yeah.
So I do want to just address the psychology of it, because it can be really hard to do, and like it felt very difficult, at least for me. I don't know if it did for you as well, to make those moves, even though we did feel logically like it was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So with that address, yeah, I'll bring up I'll answer your other point. So one of the things that we've noticed, if you look back at historical recessions, the markets tend to bottom before the recession is officially introduced. So markets, we all know, are forward looking. And so the markets will basically figure out that there is a recession before a recession is actually, officially determined by the BEA, and we get like the official print. And often it's by quite a large margin, like many months of kind of the market bottoming, and then the recession comes. And then typically when you're on your way out of a recession, the market are ripping, well before, it becomes clear that GDP growth is super strong. So this was one thing I noticed in a lot of our client meetings. You would say how we're making all these moves to go out of bonds and a little bit heavier into stocks. And then like a couple of minutes later, we'd say, all right, yeah, we actually think that we're entering a recession. And so it just seems like there could be a little contradiction between those 2 points, but actually there's not, because the market bottom tends to come in well in advance of actual official, hey, we've entered a recession land. So it can be a little counterintuitive if you don't know your economic history on how these markets move.
And we're not making light of the economic pain that we see is coming. Already there's a bunch of freight shipments that are postponed or delayed coming from China. A lot of factories. China.
Pronunciation right.
A lot of factories have paused. Their owners are paying their workers, even though they're not producing new stuff. So the factories that are dependent on the U.S. as a customer, especially, many of those have already paused and are beginning to feel pain, and they aren't going to just be able to sustain that. So I think the pressure is on China. But before we talk more about that, let's put up the chart on the VIX. So if you can pick a peak in the fear, if you can pick a peak there, then essentially you're picking the bottom. And we're counting on Jordan to get this up here on the screen.
There we go.
There we go. So it's a little small, but you can find this on X if you follow me, at Brad S. Ferguson on X. And at the bottom, maybe Matt, you can read it and then I'll explain it.
Read the post. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it says, if you have any doubt as to whether the market bottoms, study the VIX and market bottoms. Once it spikes, it rarely spikes again and goes higher. This is not the beginning of something bigger than the great financial crisis nor COVID-19. Very likely that the panic has peaked, which means bottom likely in.
Yeah. So I had to get that all in 280 characters. And as we see from the chart, the VIX got all the way past 50. I believe it might have even touched like 62 briefly that one day. Where are we going here? And what we see when it's peaked in the past is very rarely is there a double peak. We do see a bit of a double peak in when you had the European banking crisis in late 2011. But that double peak was only just above 40 on the VIX, whereas the VIX was solidly above 50 last week. So once it peaks and starts coming down, very rarely does it go back up and peak higher. So I think we've hit peak fear. It's possible the market could go lower, but kind of be slow about it. So that could potentially happen. It's also possible that the historical pattern breaks. But again, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen a lot of crises. Even before that, when I was a market maker at the CBOE, and I started working as the dot-com bubble was blowing up and getting bigger, and then I was a market maker after it already started. So I've seen many of these and how they play out. The details do change. They are different. There's always different reasons why the world is ending or calamity is coming. But every crisis does pass.
I do want to say, so I've been following VIX for a while, but maybe not looking at it as closely. And that was one of the things that surprised me when you posted that chart is, yeah, like VIX, like volatility doesn't just like kind of creep up and then like build to a crescendo. It's just like a God candle straight up and then it like dwindles down, which is really a lot different than almost all of the other indexes or markets that you take a look at. Any stock chart or bond chart or anything at all, it will be like somewhat gradual, but with VIX, it's just like, okay, we're humming along, like maybe building up, and then it's just like, whoom, like everyone is panicked that like, this is the end of capitalism and like markets are going to fall off a cliff. And that's what we saw here in that chart that you shared. And so it was just surprising to me, the nature of that chart, that there's not like a buildup. It really just goes straight vertical and then kind of tapers off. So that was pretty interesting and probably counterintuitive to most people, I would think.
Yeah, it's similar to a fire. So if you imagine it's my family and your family, and we're having a picnic, and let's say we left our backpacks down the hill for some reason, and maybe I had some cameras set up for watching some wildlife or something like that, and a fire starts near there. We're not going to race back, risk our lives to get our camera equipment. It happens really suddenly, and the temptation is to run, to get out of there. So you're going to grab all your kids, you're going to get out
Which
of
will
that.
take some time for me. Yeah.
And that would get your 7 kids, and your oldest might have to help the ones in the middle, and you and your wife could help the youngest. But you're going to get away from that area. You're not going to go back to do that. So that's the human instinct that we feel, and that's why it suddenly spikes like that in times of crisis. It's suddenly like this terror grips everyone, and that's what I sensed Sunday night. So I think maybe that was April 6th, Sunday, April 6th, or something like that. As the futures were open, all these stocks were open. Tesla was down like 10%. Robinhood and some others were down like 17%. And people are just talking on X Spaces like it was the end, that they were saying it's going lower. This is a big problem. It's going lower. And that's what brokers tend to do when we have these little mini crises, is they tend to feed into the emotion. Yeah. And I've learned better over time.
Yeah, like you have to fight your emotion, and actually, like if anything, your emotion is a good contraindicator of what you should be doing.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this a little bit before, but I mean that was what we did last week, but then also on the flip side, back in January when Tesla was over 400, we had a lot of clients, and you and I were like thinking, okay, how can we like get a little bit more exposure when Tesla runs, to 700-800 plus, in the coming years, because autonomy is finally coming, and now the market finally gets it, and we're just off to the races. So we had this FOMO when things were super good, but that was actually, I think, something that we utilized to actually say, hey, let's hold off on any kind of plans to add to risk during this time, because it's a little silly how we're basically at all-time highs, and we're thinking we're just going to double from here right away. So the emotions, I think what I've learned in the last couple of years is that the emotions can be a really helpful contraindicator. But also, like, it's very real. So when you're talking with clients, or just, for a lot of viewers who are presumably managing it for themselves, recognize what's a fact and what's a feeling. Because I tell this to my kids a lot. It's like, you can feel feelings, but your feelings are not facts. So you don't make decisions based on your feelings. It's completely fine to feel them, but those are not necessarily just the truth.
And what I was seeing otherwise was also voices that I otherwise respected. I feel like generally Bill Ackman has a lot of solid takes and solid advice and great perspective. And that Sunday night, he had done a total 180 versus what he was saying 48 hours earlier about the tariffs. So he had done a total 180 on it and was very panicked about it. Just other voices I also respect had also kind of turned from supporting the tariffs to being against it, and being very panicky about it.
Mhm.
So it's about like paying attention to what people are saying, so the whole sentiment around it. There's also some things we saw in the market technicals. We've been dabbling a little bit with technical analysis. We don't know if it's predictive or anything, but that helped us show that, you know, maybe there was something wrong to lead up to that before that.
Mhm.
Also, we had been
Yeah.
posting about margin balances, that margin balances had gone up um, since
Yeah.
the prior peak in November of 2021.
Yeah, so in general, just trying to hoover up all these different data points, whether it's technical. We would never make trades just based on technicals alone, just like to
Mhm.
to be clear. But if you're looking at technicals in conjunction with fundamentals and with like margin and what's going on with macro and just like overall like PE ratios of a lot of companies, like we want to look at everything in totality when we're kind of making these decisions. But let's maybe play devil's advocate a little bit. So I think I'm maybe less optimistic on the tariffs than you.
Mhm.
I think it was pretty stupid, to be honest, the way that they introduced them and called them like tariffs and non-tariff barriers, when it was really just net imports. I thought that was just not a good look. Now maybe they were intentionally provoking in order to strike a good deal or something. Um, but I think it's not completely clear to me that this is definitely going to be a good thing. And I think the longer it plays out, I think we talked about this last week too, the more that there's at least potential for supply chain shocks that could be a more serious, could wreak a little bit more serious economic harm and
Mhm.
therefore lead to maybe a deeper recession than even you and I are thinking we might be in for right now. So how do you think through the potential that we don't back down with China, that there is some sort of escalation, that even if there is some reshoring back to America, that will obviously take years to pan out. And so maybe there's a fair amount of kind of collateral damage along the way as we get to a better place ultimately with these tariffs. What's your thought response to that?
So I agree that the messaging was overly simplistic. But I think if they got more technical, they would have lost most Americans. Most people just in general, they just want to read the headline, maybe a couple bullet points, and they're kind of done with something. So I think purposely they kept it simple in the messaging, because if they went through everything, it would lose a lot of people. So, like one example of a non-tariff barrier that China has is typically if you want to be a business that's operating in China, you have to give 51% ownership of your business to a local Chinese partner, and they have to have. So essentially, they have control. Maybe there's
Mhm.
some negotiation around what they pay for you to operate there, but I think in general it's a gift. So you're just giving them 51% of the profits. You can fact check me on that. That's a huge barrier. There's also around IP protection,
Mhm.
and there's other things like subsidies for exporters,
Yeah.
other types of things. So it's like very complicated. And if they got into all that, I think they would have lost a lot of people.
I think that's true, but I think I'd just try to differentiate between 2 points. One is like messaging, and I agree with you on messaging. Like you can't go into all those implications, but with the actual policy, the negotiating stance, it wasn't nuanced. It was basically just like a dumb formula of like net imports,
Mhm.
as a proxy for tariff and non-tariff barriers, which is just not accurate. So that was, I guess, my issue is that I'm fine if the messaging was simple, but the policy itself was simple, and that was what I did not like about it, because they messaged it as being one thing, what you just said, and the reality
Mhm.
was it was like way too simple
Yeah.
in the execution.
Yeah.
So that's what I didn't like about it.
Let me go with your point for a second. So I know we get a lot of coffee from, I think, Ethiopia.
Mhm.
And I'm guessing there's some kind of trade deficit with Ethiopia because of this. And I don't know if they were on the list, but um, yeah, if they're not giving their farmers a subsidy to export to the US and it's just like a best place for us to get our coffee from, then maybe there's not a reason for that uh, trade deficit other than a true competitive advantage, a comparative
Yeah.
advantage.
Mhm.
So I agree, they need to go through things, and I think that's kind of what's kicked off now, where
Yeah.
they're working with the various countries and figuring out how to correct things. What Trump is doing is on a scale that's never been before seen. Maybe we had something like this with the Marshall Plan or whatever, or with the WTO, but he's essentially getting everyone to the table, except for China. So
China.
I think that's a big benefit, and he's also showing that he's flexible. Essentially, what Trump is doing when with the with the initial announcement is he said, "Hey, uh,
Mhm.
you give us all this money and the tariffs," and he's doing this, and all the other countries besides China is like, "Okay, okay, don't 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 do that thing to us," and then and then Trump's like, "Okay, we're gonna lower this and we'll talk." So like that was the first concession that they made. And then I was on last Thursday with Randy Kirk, and he was talking about the major sources of imbalance with China. And one of the big ones is electronics and our computers. Computers are important, not just for playing on, but also for education and business. So then they have this carve out for computers and other electronics. So I think that shows a flexibility. The U.S. and others will have to be flexible in the solutions that they come to. But in a negotiation, a negotiation is like a war, and you don't want your opponent to know all the pieces that you have available, nor do you want them to know how you're going to use the pieces or when
Mhm.
or what conditions. So you're not going to give that to your opponent. So a lot of the complaints are, well, you keep changing and we don't know what's next. But that's part of the negotiation is you want to have surprise on your side. You want to have leverage on your side. So I'm a little more optimistic, but things could get ugly in China real fast. And like you said, with the supply chain, you already have allegedly all these ocean going vessels that are just choosing not to head over to the US and pausing shipments until they get more clarity.
Yeah, and we did see a video. I'm not sure how reliable this is, but like a pretty significant, like congestion at ports because you've got all these, crates that were basically outbound for the U.S. and now the ships aren't going there, and there's a lot of merchants or manufacturers in China, I should say, and exporters who are just stuck with a lot of inventory, and they're like, what do we do with like all this polyester or all these, pants that we've made and there's a big we watch a lot of videos of like Chinese entrepreneurs trying to focus on the domestic market instead, and
Mhm.
I'm not sure that that's a viable strategy. I think they'd have to reduce their output a little bit, but even still, just like domestically, what are they going to do with this? All this congestion at their ports. It seems like it's a pretty big problem for them. So I
Yeah.
do think Trump does have a little bit more leverage here. Not that China has no leverage, and not that I want a prolonged and protracted trade war. I think most people would prefer some sort of path down, as long as there's um, some parity with the policies that China has and what we have. I think most Americans would support that, but maybe not if it takes 12 months of negotiating to get to that point, and there's been chaos wreaked on both economies, if it takes that long to kind of play out. So I still think that there is some uncertainty and it could get worse from here. But I think what the market seems to be saying right now is that there's going to be some pragmatism that's involved in these negotiations, and things aren't going to. Trump's not going to let us get to some insane depression, where it's severe supply shortages of critical components that impacts a lot of daily users and consumers of things. So to me, that seems like the most likely course that we're on right here. But you got to kind of be open-minded to other ways that this could pan out.
So let me talk about some dangers.
Ooh,
we don't know how much banks are, like U.S. banks, are levered, or what their risks are to global trade. I'm guessing they're fairly minor, but maybe there's a big bank that's caught up in this somehow. Typically HSBC, these Swiss banks, maybe they've gotten religion, but they tend to get in trouble over time with being a little too aggressive with their loans. Chinese banks, I'm guessing there's going to be some pain coming, and that the Chinese government is going to need to bail out or heavily support their banks. Already initially in early April, China did a large domestic stimulus package. So I'm guessing there's probably going to be more stimulus packages. They'll likely lower rates in China and lower the amount of reserves that banks have to keep against the loans in China. So I think the pressure is really on China, and there is a potential for things to get a little worse before they get better. And we do think that there's a very strong potential that we're already in a recession. And what's possible is it may get announced and the market may not ever go lower than where it was in April 7th or 8th. So that's kind of where we're at. We'll see what happens from here. And I will say, like, just about me, like I chuckle at things. I'm just recognizing like how real it is, and so I'm not laughing at the situation. I'm internalizing that how awesome and potentially painful things could be.
Yeah. So let's talk about Tesla a little bit. Had registrations from China come out today. Obviously, a little bit on the low side, but that happens every single quarter. Seems like we just got some more exporting going on early on in the quarter, which makes sense. But what's your sense on the overall kind of production ramp of Shanghai in particular, and then maybe for the refresh Model Ys globally? Where do you think we are in that S-curve of ramping back up to full production rates?
I think Shanghai is very close to getting all the way there. I'm guessing that a lot of the shortfall in these first couple of weeks of April are because of exports to Asia and Oceania. So exports to South Korea and Australia, other places in Asia. Tesla does make the Model Y in Europe, so I don't think they'll be exporting them to Europe. I don't think there would be any reason for that to happen. Not really sure where production is with the US and Germany. I would love for Tesla to comment on that on the earnings call that's coming up in, what is it, 2 weeks or?
No, it's next week.
Next week, okay. So
I think it's next Tuesday, actually. So
yeah,
no, we might have to reschedule this.
Would love to get commentary on that. Maybe we could do our live and then we go right to the earnings call and send people on to a different stream or whatever. Let's talk about the earnings questions or what we'd like to see in a bit. But I do think the rollout's going fine. It's definitely slower in the US and Europe. I do worry about a little bit of brand damage in Europe because of how Europeans think about Ukraine. They don't want Ukraine to just give all the land that Russia's taken. They don't want them to just give it to Russia just for peace, and that's what Musk has been saying. So they're not
Well,
big fans.
I think it's that, and it's also his support for the German AfD party, right? It's
Yeah,
I think it's both those things in tandem. But it
yeah,
is just crazy to me, the Tesla being protested globally, like by all the people who used to support it so staunchly. I mean, even before all this, there were the like climate activists that like literally
Mhm.
blew up the transformer going into the the bringing the power into the factory. Like that is just so insane. Of all the different companies that you could criticize for environmental reasons, like you're criticizing Tesla because of some trees. It's just
Yeah.
so
Tesla
insanely
uses the
dumb.
least amount of water out of all the car makers in Europe. They use the least, and it was crazy for the environmentalists to protest it then.
Yeah. So, but let's talk about where we go from here. I think you and I are both expecting a pretty weak Q1 in terms of earnings per share.
Mhm.
I think it's my model right now is around 30 cents of earnings per share. I think you're thinking we go even lower than that.
Mhm.
Um, so I think my expectation is that the earnings themselves are going to be worse than even analysts are projecting right now, and the analyst estimates have been coming down. Last I saw, it was something like 40 cents. So I think still way too high.
Yeah.
And I think what they were doing is they were just looking at Q1 of last year, which was a similar volume of deliveries, and they were basically just like, okay, at this many deliveries, it seems like you got about 40 cents of earnings per share. That's really a stupid way of doing it when you've got like very massive discounts on your inventory Model Ys. You've got all the ramping challenges of the new Model
Mhm.
Y. And so you've got, like lower depreciation, lower fixed cost absorption over all your units that you're selling,
Yeah.
as well as some price cuts that have gone into effect since then. So I think the current estimates are definitely too high. But does that even matter? I think you and I would say we were never invested for quarterly earnings to begin with, but in terms of where the stock might go after earnings report, is probably not going to matter so much on the actual numbers themselves, I would guess, but maybe a lot more on kind of tone and outlook. And it seems like the very obvious elephant in the room is what's going on with Austin. So any um, extra information they can give around how that launch preparations for launch are going and whether that's still on track or not. What else are you looking to hear out of this earnings call?
Yeah. So the robotaxi, the size of it, the expected size, shape, and timing. So they should be prepping investors for what to expect. That's what these earnings calls should be. It's what investor relations should be about. So, how many cars are they going to do initially in Austin? They need to clarify: is it just for employees starting off? Just so everyone knows we're on the same page. Um, but then, how soon will they be able to roll it out to Dallas and Houston? How many cars would that be initially? Um, how long will it be until Austin will let them do more cars? And how many more can they add at that time? So we need to know what the shape and size of this is and the timing so we can begin to model it out. That's what Wall Street will want to be able to model it out.
Do you think they actually give us those details though? I hear you saying all the things that investor relations should be, and I'm thinking Tesla investor relations has never really been those things. so
We should understand like what are the and they're not really giving anything away to their competitors.
Mhm.
I think Uber and Lyft are going to do anti-competitive things as soon as they go into Austin, et cetera. They're going to offer big discounts. They're going to offer like some Uber One package at a discount where all your rides are 50% off or something like that. And they're going to force Tesla to discount their fare likely.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I I think it would behoove them to tell us kind of what to expect. Another thing that they should set expectations on is around what they're doing with lithium, with making cathode material and making batteries. We really haven't heard anything about the LFP equipment that they bought from CATL that was allegedly working. when CATL shipped it to the US. But we haven't heard anything about LFP batteries coming out of Gigafactory Nevada. Now, maybe those are going into megapacks already, and we just don't know. That's a possibility. But I would want to toot our horn if I was Tesla and say, hey, we're making LFPs that are going into megapacks.
Well, and I think with the tariff concerns with China and knowing how many CATL cells are actually imported by Tesla right now, this seems like a very pertinent question and one that I would be shocked if they don't address. I mean, they're going to have to address that. But I think the bigger question is in my mind is around these rare earths like we have here. It's not just lithium and some of the stuff that goes into the battery, but there's even some components that go into the motors. Those induction motors that are not made in any meaningful volumes here. So back in Investor Day, we got some details around how they were trying to reduce the rare earths that were in the entire bill of materials, but we really have no idea how exposed Tesla may be to any of these export restrictions from China. So I'd love to get some info on that, but if they don't have a solution yet, then I'm not sure what information they might be able to share, because you could envision a scenario at least where they don't have sufficient inventories of these of the products that have these materials in them, or that their suppliers don't. And so if there is an export restriction that just goes into effect, then that could actually be a very serious problem for supply that Tesla has of all their products. So I'd love to hear them discuss that in a bit more detail, because that's one that I'm sure they've got a decent workaround for, but I'd love to know exactly what those plans are and just management's tone around how material these impacts could be.
Yeah, so I'm curious where they are with the motor that doesn't need the rare earths. I'm guessing they can't just switch the process at Gigafactory Nevada to suddenly make that new motor out of something that doesn't require rare earths. And yeah, we don't know, as Matt said, we don't understand or know the stocks of those materials, what they had in storage and what they may have built up in advance of this. Going back to batteries, I think we want to know about 4680. The head of 4680 on LinkedIn came out 3-4 weeks ago and was very bullish about them finally scaling 4680. We've been waiting a very long time for this. Over 4.5 years, or around 4.5 years for 4680 to be scaling. That's since Battery Day. So have they finally solved it, and are they going to be able to make it at high volume? Elon did say that they're able to get the cost down to less than what they're paying for batteries from other battery producers. Is that a reliable thing, or is that just in batches? I'm a little skeptical at this point.
Yeah, I am too. Especially, I mean, I'm having a little trauma back to, I think it was like 2 years ago. Elon was talking about how they're finally ready to scale this Tesla Semi, and I was like, yes. And so you start, modeling out, maybe 1,000 or so a quarter, and then maybe ramping up. But like, we're still basically nowhere on Semi ramp, 2 years after those comments. Might have even been longer. I don't remember exactly when that was, but it was many years ago. So I'm a little skeptical that this 4680 scaling thing could be a little bit of Elon time also, or just he says things that turn out not to mean quite what he says. I mean, because when you say 4680 are scaling, I mean, what does that mean? Does that mean that they're you got more than just are needed for Cybertrucks? Because I mean, they were originally putting them in Model Ys built in Texas, and they stopped that because they couldn't ramp up supply fast enough. So could they start getting some 4680s in Model Ys? Could they even start putting them into some megapacks, which was part of the plan that he announced when he did the Giga Nevada kind of upgrade speech 1.5 2 years ago? So I've got a lot of questions on.
Or is it unlimited power?
all your power are belong to us. Yeah, maybe
Also
it's
curious
also,
about Optimus. What's the Optimus that they're going to make this year? Is it a second generation Optimus that we've seen, but maybe with the new hand that we saw at the Wii Robot event, or uh, should we expect that those Optimus are the like a third generation Optimus? That would be useful to know. They could be vague about it as to not like give away stuff to other people in the humanoid robot space that are competitors. Also, some clarity, like some clarification. We talked about this over 2 months ago, Matt, about the new affordable models.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm disappointed with what we've learned so far. So we've got a new affordable Cybertruck,
Mhm.
allegedly, which is modest changes. Although I will say I'll eat my words a little bit because I think we were talking last week about my declaration that Cybertruck was a commercial failure. Now we've got a new lower price variant, which actually looks a lot more
Mhm.
competitive from a price standpoint. So maybe I was too quick to call that a commercial failure. Although I'll still reserve judgment on that. So maybe I'll take it back right now, pending judgment on how this new variant
So,
comes out.
can you say the words?
I was wrong with those words.
And Bradford, you were.
No, I'm not going to say that you were right. I think it's you said it was a bad take and that it was not true. Like I think everything we've seen so far is that Cybertruck has not delivered in a meaningfully significant commercial manner. If you look at S, X, and Cybertruck together, those lines compared to what their production capacity is, it's really not good. Now I think like autonomy is what really matters. So I'm not,
Yeah.
super alarmed by it, but it's like you'd kind of like to see some more growth in these other segments. So I'm hopeful that we can get that with this new variant, but I'm not. I still don't think they'll be doing like 50,000 a quarter anytime, even with an improved, cost structure. Just because I think the design is so polarizing. But I'd love to be proven wrong on that. And if I am wrong, I will definitely say I was wrong and you were right, Bradford.
Ooh. Maybe
um,
maybe our editor can just take that clip and just use that clip. That'd be good. How about this though? On the bright side of things, Tesla did launch the Cybertruck. They did sell it in some meaningful volume, not the kind of volume we'd like to see, and it was a pickup truck. So they cracked into the pickup truck market, and I think they're winning some hearts and minds. There's a lot of people that hate it just by the looks of it. It is
yes.
very polarizing, and I think that's on purpose. And I think they're going to sell more of them as time goes on and the price does continue to come down. Right now, it's the best value in electric pickup trucks, but it like of the type of trim that it is, and I think yeah, I'm curious to see the shape and and the price, like how those things change over time. Um,
Yeah, but so I think the bigger question, I mean, even if that does
yeah,
pick up quite a bit, it's not going to be an extra, 100, 200,000 units. So when we were reading through, the language that was in the last several quarterly letters of, introduce several new models in 2025, including, new lower price variants. Are we just getting versions like this with some cloth seats, or is there an actual new model that's lower price that will in a meaningful way increase the TAM, the total addressable market for Tesla, where it's a more confident prediction that they blow past the 2 million vehicle unit range in a given year. Where do you
yeah.
stand on that now that we've got some more months of data points in?
Yeah, maybe the bears are right, that it's just more affordable models, not necessarily new, and a generous usage of the word new. Um, so yeah, I do think it would be bearish if we didn't get a compact, because the compact greatly extends the market, and I think Tesla's ability to suddenly sell like 1 million or roll out 1 million cyber cabs in 1 year is going to be limited by cities and states, even if states are more permissive of autonomy in their state. I believe there's going to be limits enforced in general.
So speaking of autonomy, we've got a Elon tweet that just dropped. Post.
Well,
one day it'll drive itself right to your house, and Elon says this year. So you order a new Tesla with your phone, and the car literally just drives itself to your house. Like, this, as much as I'm happy to hand wring about new models coming out, even if they don't introduce any new models, I would still be invested in the company because autonomy is the play, and we've done the math on how disruptive this is, how massive the market is, and the huge cost advantage that Tesla has. I mean, this idea of like I order a Tesla and it just goes to my house. I mean, imagine the TikToks of people doing that, and like just like literally this car just pulls into your driveway. You're like, what? Like so few people know about FSD right now. This is one of the things you and I have been talking a lot about this year. Like you and I are following this super closely because we got the latest version of it. We see how good it is. We know that it finally is the real deal. It has not been for a long time. Now it actually is. Like, is this what it's going to take to get like the broader population aware of what's going on? Like, what's it going to take?
I think that would help. I think it would help if Elon, if he only did interviews from a self-driving Tesla. I think that would help. You could have Elon and Joe Rogan or Elon and Trump in a self-driving Tesla, or however that looks. I think that would help. Yeah, essentially like maybe 1 million people or so, and that's the number of hardware 4 cars that are in the United States that are Teslas. About 1 million people or so know how good version 13 of Tesla self-driving is, and that we may have gotten a peak of a rebrand of full self-driving to Tesla self-driving, which is what was showing on the screen for the Tesla driving itself from the factory down through the tunnel in Texas to the outbound lot. It said Tesla self-driving on it. I think, yeah, we need some kind of, maybe Elon would finally get more into advertising once self-driving was going, but I'm not sure how much the robotaxi rollout in Austin is going to go viral because it may only be with Tesla employees for a while. So it won't you can't just like fly down there or be some random dude in Austin and grab one of these. They might do an event where they give you access, but otherwise, it may not be allowed. Maybe that's what the whole like FSD new early access is about, is giving some people the ability to ride in something that's driverless at an event.
Yeah, I don't know. It's shocking to me that more people don't know about this because it is so exciting, I think. But even a lot of like casual Tesla owners are just like, oh yeah, like it works pretty well, I guess. Like, or they haven't tried it in a year and they're like, yeah, I've got a free trial, but I haven't tried it. So I don't know. I'm like shocked that it hasn't broke through into the zeitgeist more broadly, but my sense is it's only a matter of time because it's going to be so impactful, not only to Tesla's financials, but to like society. And I mean, just like the overall user experience of, like I'm coming down to Indiana next week and, I'll be self-driving the whole way, which will be great. But if I could actually be on my computer doing some work, like while it was like, that would completely change, my day in a very meaningful way and really free up a lot of my time, which is very valuable. So I think this is such a big deal and we're so close to it. So it's fun to have a front row seat and kind of watch this. And anyone who has not tried it, who's watching us right now, strongly encourage you, go check out, do a test drive of the latest version of full self-driving.
Mm-hmm. On hardware 4 vehicle.
On hardware 4, definitely. Yeah. What else do we have on our docket? So any other new vehicles? I guess we didn't completely come full circle on that. Do you think we have, let's say, a new vehicle this year that's being launched in addition to these new variants that we're hearing about?
Well, I'm confident that it's not going to be the Robovan. So, there were Tesla engineers at the We Robot event that were talking about saying, "Oh, this is just a prototype." So I think the Robovan comes later after successful robotaxi launch. It'll be a way where a lot of people going on the same route can share one ride, and then once they get to the end of the route, then there'll be a bunch of individual robo taxis for them to hop on to. So I think that the Robovan will come later. I'm hopeful that there'll be a compact, but I almost feel like it's less than 50-50, and I do think it'll be bearish for the stock if we actually don't get a compact this quarter or this year.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird situation because I feel like we got a decent amount of negative things going on right now with the stock, with the company's fundamentals in the very short term. At the same time, we are literally like 2 months away from like an absolutely massive milestone in the history of the company. So I don't know how to balance those things, and maybe we just accept some short term volatility so that we don't miss the upside that we believe will be there. Not investment advice. Definitely not suggesting anyone trade in any particular way about it, but I mean, just as an investor and a commentator and someone who's following this closely, like I feel like it's one of the rare times I feel like I've got no clue like what's coming in the next month, just because you've got such a mix of negatives and positives all together.
So we're not talking about this to FUD people. This is legitimately what's on our minds. We believe in Tesla long term, and we love the self-driving product. I really enjoy self-driving. So there are times where like I have my weeklies with Randy, I might get to the office early. And it's like so early, I'll just like extend the route so I go further and just do some more self-driving. The other day I was early to like 15 minutes early to something else, and I just added more to my route and just putzed around and kind of like took a break on self-driving. It's really enjoyable.
Yeah, so I agree with you on that. It's super enjoyable, but it's also to the point now where I think I actually trust it more than I trust myself now, which is a weird state to admit. But I had this situation the other day. I was trying to rush back because I think it was in the middle of our trading on Tuesday. I had to leave in the middle of the day and then rush back. So I was turning left, and I was like, I'll drive because I'll be a little faster than FSD will be. And so I looked both ways and started to pull out, and then I realized that like the guy who was coming this way had actually turned into the left turn lane. He was going to turn right into my way. So I was like, I had to kind of hit the brakes kind of hard. I was like, all right, well, I'll just let FSD drive from now on because it's always watching. It doesn't look this way, then look that way, and then go. So it's just I've had enough of those situations where it's just like I'm like slightly embarrassed at like my driving. Nothing super bad or anything like that, but I'm like FSD just doesn't make those mistakes anymore, and I occasionally still do, and it's humbling, but it's also I think really exciting for humanity because so many people die from this. It's of course we love it for the investing standpoint, but also like this is I firmly believe as a human being this is just an incredibly great thing for society. You think of how many lives seatbelts have saved. This is going to be a multiple of that, and I think it's going to be a much better world for our children to grow up in a world that has cars that are always watching and driving and not making the same dumb mistakes that we do, or God forbid, drunk drivers or people who are really distracted.
For me, I'm also finding that I am making more potentially dangerous mistakes than FSD is making. And when this happens, it is embarrassing. I agree with that. And
Will you admit that you were wrong and FSD was right, Bradford?
yes, I will. The other thing is, like, if you're just supervising FSD and being hyper vigilant, it's pretty easy to be hypercritical because you're able to scan more of the scene and pay attention to more compared to when you're driving. So this is kind of what this is the insight that Matt and I have gained from driving it versus letting it drive for us. Is we've discovered that it is now better than us making better decisions.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, it's almost like if you're hyper vigilant and just like waiting for it to make a mistake, you're just being like a backseat driver. And it's like, oh, why did it do that little thing? And I've even noticed myself doing that every once in a while, like, oh, like it's being a little weird right here. And then I noticed there's a person that I didn't see that was like hiding behind a car, basically waiting for me to pass. But it was like I didn't see that person, and so it's just, even when I'm criticizing it, sometimes I'm wrong. So it's kind of wild. One of the things I've noticed recently is it's extremely good at avoiding squirrels now. Like it used to definitely slow down for dogs and make sometimes for squirrels. Now it seems like every single time a squirrel runs out, it'll either slow down or it'll like turn out of the way a little bit. So it's just getting so much more smooth and natural, and the mistakes that it's making are, I would say, like across the board in my experience, just stylistic mistakes, So it's hard to even call them mistakes because it's doing things slightly different than I would.
Whereas the mistakes I notice with myself are more dangerous.
Yeah.
So
same.
we should definitely make a clip of that little discussion we just had. We'll be putting that on X. I think it'd also make a good clip on here on YouTube as well. I'm Bradford Ferguson. He is Matt Smith. We are with rebellionaire.com. And with that, I'm going to say bye for now.
Bye for now.